In the southwest corner of Cyprus lies a city that does not separate myth from history, but allows them to exist side by side, layered into the same landscape. Paphos is not simply a destination, it is an accumulation, a place shaped not by a single moment in time, but by thousands of years of belief, power, movement, and memory. To begin to understand Paphos, you must begin with the story that defines it. According to ancient tradition, this is the birthplace of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. She is said to have emerged from the sea nearby, rising from the foam onto the shores of Cyprus. The image is powerful and enduring, not because it is provable, but because it has shaped how people have understood this place for centuries. Paphos, from the very beginning, was never just geographical. It was symbolic. And that symbolism attracted attention. By the time the Romans established their presence here, Paphos had already become one of the most important urban centers on the island. It was chosen as the capital of Cyprus, not by accident, but because of its position. It sat at the intersection of maritime routes that connected the Eastern Mediterranean with the wider Roman world. Trade flowed through here. Ideas moved through here. Authority was exercised from here. Today, the remains of that world are preserved within the remarkable expanse of the Paphos Archaeological Park. At first glance, it may appear as a collection of ruins, broken columns, exposed foundations, fragments of walls. But as you move through the site, a different picture begins to form. This was not a forgotten city. It was a functioning, organized, and highly developed center of life. The most striking features are the Roman villas, not because of their size, but because of what remains beneath your feet. The mosaics. Entire floors, preserved in extraordinary detail, stretch across the site. Scenes from mythology unfold in stone. Figures of gods, hunters, and heroes are captured mid-movement, their expressions and forms still visible after nearly 2 millennia. These mosaics were not decorative luxuries alone. They were statements of identity. They reflected education, belief, and status. To walk across them now is to step directly into the worldview of the people who lived here. In one villa, a mythological scene plays out with precise symmetry. In another, geometric patterns extend across entire rooms, suggesting order, control, and intention. Each mosaic tells a different story, but together they form a wider narrative about how the inhabitants of Paphos saw themselves in relation to the world. And above them, once, stood structures filled with life. Rooms where conversations shaped decisions, courtyards where people gathered, spaces where daily routines unfolded against the backdrop of empire. The silence of the site today is striking, but it is not empty. It is full of absence. You can sense what once existed here, not through reconstruction, but through what remains. And then, as you move toward the coastline, the perspective shifts. Rising above the surrounding landscape is the Paphos Lighthouse. It stands apart from the ruins, both physically and symbolically. Where the archaeological park speaks of the past, the lighthouse speaks of continuity. For centuries, this coastline has been a point of arrival and departure. Ships have approached these shores carrying goods, soldiers, merchants, and travelers. The Mediterranean, vast and unpredictable, demanded guidance. The lighthouse became that guide. It is not ancient in the same sense as the ruins, but it belongs to the same story. Because Paphos has always been outward-looking. From the base of the lighthouse, the sea stretches endlessly toward the horizon. It is easy to forget, standing there, that this view once determined the fate of the city. Trade routes brought wealth. Strategic positioning brought power. But they also brought vulnerability. Paphos was never isolated. It was exposed. And yet, that exposure is what allowed it to thrive. The lighthouse represents more than navigation. It represents connection. A fixed point in a world defined by movement. And then, just beyond the main city, the narrative takes a darker, more introspective turn. The tombs of the kings. Despite the name, no kings were buried here. The title reflects the scale and grandeur of the site, not its occupants. This was a necropolis reserved for elites, officials, and individuals of high status during the Hellenistic and Roman periods. But what matters is not who was buried here, it is how. The tombs are carved directly into the rock, forming a vast underground complex that mirrors the world above. Large chambers open into central courtyards. Columns support carved facades. Some tombs resemble entire houses, designed with a level of care that suggests permanence rather than finality. Descending into these spaces feels like entering another version of the city. A quieter one, a more deliberate one. Here, architecture is not used to house the living, but to preserve the presence of the dead. There is a weight to the air in these tombs. Sound behaves differently. Light enters from above, casting sharp contrasts across the stone. The deeper you move into the site, the more the outside world seems to recede. It becomes easier to imagine the rituals that once took place here. Processions moving slowly through the entrances, offerings placed carefully within the chambers. Moments of silence that were not empty, but full of meaning. The tombs reveal something fundamental about the people who built them. They did not see death as an end. They saw it as a continuation. Status, identity, and memory were not erased. They were preserved, embedded into the architecture itself. Taken together, the archaeological park, the lighthouse, and the tombs form a complete narrative of Paphos. They represent 3 stages of existence: life, connection, and memory. Few places in the world present these elements so clearly and within such close proximity. But Paphos is not defined solely by its past. It continues. Modern streets run alongside ancient foundations. Cafes and homes exist within sight of structures that predate them by thousands of years. This coexistence is not accidental. It is part of the identity of the city. Paphos does not separate its history from its present. It carries it forward. There is a moment, often unnoticed, where this becomes clear. Standing near the edge of the archaeological park, with the lighthouse visible in the distance and the sea beyond it, you can see multiple layers of time at once. The ruins beneath your feet, the structure of the lighthouse rising above them, and the horizon, unchanged, stretching outward as it has for millennia. It is in that moment that Paphos reveals itself, not as a relic, but as a continuum. Empires arrived here, shaped it, and left their mark. The Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines. Each contributed something, but none erased what came before. The result is not a single story, but a layered one. And that layering is what gives Paphos its depth. As the day begins to fade, the atmosphere shifts. The light softens across the ruins. The mosaics lose their sharp contrast, blending into the earth. The lighthouse becomes a silhouette against the sky, and the tombs, carved into the rock, seem to draw closer to the surface. Everything becomes quieter, not empty, but still. It is in this stillness that Paphos feels most complete. Because this is a place that has seen everything. Trade and conquest, devotion and decline, arrival and departure. And yet, nothing feels lost. The stories remain. The structures remain. The presence remains. Paphos does not present its past as something distant. It allows you to step into it, to move through it, to experience it, not as an observer, but as part of the same continuum that has defined the city for thousands of years. And when you leave, that sense does not disappear. Because Paphos is not just a place you visit. It is a place that stays with you. A place where myth meets history, where life meets memory, and where the passage of time is not hidden, but visible in every direction. And that is what makes it unforgettable.